It's Friday, April 14th, 2023. Okay, everybody, we're going to do another little special show because Lando is somewhere and isn't around to do a recording. So we're going to do another little special where we're going to talk about a single show for the entire episode, single television show, similar to the Schitt's Creek episode. Before we get into that, reminder, patreon.com/Ozone Nightmare is one place you can go to support the show. You can go to the show homepage and click the PayPal button on the lower right. If you see there's a little picture of a bookmark, a book with a bookmark, that will take you to Lando's Amazon author page. And in every show note, you will see a little Linktree link, which will show you all my stuff instead of me bulleting it out for 18 minutes. Okay, all that stuff out of the way. I'm going to welcome back my wife, Samantha. Hello, Sam.
Hi.
And we're going to be we did Schitt's Creek the last time, which was a fun episode. And I actually got some positive feedback on that, which is always nice. And this time we were thinking of doing The Good Place. That was the original plan. But we haven't watched The Good Place in a little bit. So we thought it would be better to do a show that was a little fresher in mind. And so we had just watched the entire run of Parks and Recreation, which is kind of a sister show in many ways to The Good Place anyway, because it's basically one of the same show creators. I think Parks and Rec has got two creators listed. I don't know if they're both on the good. Are they both Good Place people?
No. Mike sure is, but I don't think Greg Daniels is. No.
Okay. Yeah, I looked him up, so he's not. But interestingly, he was involved in The Office, the American Office, I should say, because there was the British Office that came first, which I watched a little bit of. And even though I generally find Ricky Gervais to be pretty funny, I was never that big a fan of The Office because it was way too much uncomfortable humor, which is just not my thing. And so even though his ability to be a horribly funny person was very funny, it just wasn't a great show. And then when they did the American one, it was essentially the same thing. I know people love The Office, America. Fine, you can like whatever you want. I don't care, but it wasn't really for me. But that's what makes the beginning of Parks and Rec interesting, because this is a show where when you watch the first season, it's such a different show than what it later became. And I think part of that is because it was trying to be an Office type of show. In fact, they've said that, so it's not even me speculating that. They had said they started off trying to make a mockumentary show about the Parks and Recreation Department. And so the first season it's not that it's not funny, but it's definitely not as funny. There's something tonally different about it where it doesn't feel like it necessarily even belongs to the rest of the show, but you can't really have the rest of the show without it, so you can't really throw it away. You know what I mean? It's a different feeling when you watch that first season, right? I mean, you would say the same thing.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't say it feels uncomfortable, but kind of. Because Leslie Knope is way different. She's over the top in a way, like she's always over the top, but in the first season it feels very different. The other characters that are so great Like, I don't think Donna says one word in the first season at all. And she's one of the best things of this show. You know, I mean, she's just a great character. So, yeah, the first season feels very different.
Yeah, I think Tom is basically the same, although a little different, but the character doesn't really change much. It's definitely not uncomfortable. They definitely moved from going for the uncomfortable, make people feel bad humor to the everybody's trying to be positive thing, which they kept going with. But it definitely feels, it's almost more serious. It feels more serious. There's less of the I don't want to say goofiness, because it's not really a goofy show, but the lightness isn't there. There's not the lightheartedness is missing.
Right. And like you said in our Schitt's Creek episode, where Ron's always in a suit and he's way more rigid and in the first season, and that just feels weird, you know, like,
yeah,
because then he just,
Ron is a strange character, because the main thing about Ron is there right from the beginning, which is he's loyal to people that he thinks are honest and straight with him. That's there right away, because that's in first season. There's several examples where you don't really know what you're going to make of Ron at first when you first come into the show and you don't really know the character, which I never watched this when it was originally on. I remember all the Ron Swanson memes and everybody was talking about his mustache, and I remember seeing it everywhere. And I went, oh, okay, well, there's some character named Ron Swanson that everybody seems to like. But I think that whole thing kind of put me off to it, because just stuff that generally is pop culture big, I'm kind of like, okay, it's probably not for me. So I remember it was around, and there was the Ron Swanson stuff was going on, and I knew what the show was generally, but never really watched it. So coming into this, if you don't know anything about what comes later, and we're going to be talking about all the spoilers for the show, so sorry if you've never seen it, go watch it first. You can stop. But the show's been off the air for 8 years now, so I'm not really concerned. He seems like he's going to be, him and Leslie will be against each other, but not in a, well, we have respect for each other way. They seem to be set up to not like each other, and it's going to be a show where she and he will be battling every other episode, and it's going to be mean, and because they actually don't like each other. And nothing like that happens until very, very late in the show, and it's brief even when it does happen, where they actually don't like each other. So, but yes, his whole thing where he's in a suit and his hair is very parted and it's very close. He seems like an office manager.
Yeah.
And then you get to the second season and that vanishes almost instantly, and he seems like he's his twin brother, who is not quite as uptight, but the same basic person. So Leslie is basically the same, except the tone is just a little bit weird. But you have to get through that first season. And I can understand, because and then Mark is the only other character who's basically the same. Mark is basically the straight man. He is the normal person.
Yeah.
Who,
Well, and Anne and Andy they're kind of the same too.
Yeah, but yes, they are the same, but they're not as, you don't see as much of them.
No,
they don't become as dominant until later.
Sure.
Honestly, I don't know anything, because I haven't listened to the podcast about it, which I know you're a big fan of. But no, I'm sorry, that's not for this. The Good Place one.
That was the Good Place.
Yeah, there's a Parks and Rec one. I listened to a couple episodes. It was fine. I probably would listen to it again just for the trivia in the background of it, but I kind of was like, all right, I don't really.
Was
need
that the
to
one
listen
that Rob Lowe and
and the bass
writers
player
did?
Yeah, the bass player from the band. Yang, I think, is his last name. I don't remember.
Yeah, he's a writer too, I think.
Right.
And I think he wrote on the Good Place as well. So a lot of these people interchange.
Yeah, virtually everybody who shows up on this show, I think, shows up on The Good Place as well, even if it's only for like one episode. A lot of them do. I don't know if everybody does, but a lot of them seem to pop up here and there or do voice work, that type of thing. But, oh God, I don't remember where I was going with this. Oh, so with Andy, I almost wonder, not knowing any of the background of it, if Andy was intended to stay the whole series. Because he feels like maybe he was planned to disappear after he and Ann split up in the first, I think I would wonder if they were like, wow, this guy's actually really funny, we have to keep him around, as opposed to, because he doesn't feel like he's a really important character in the first season. He's there.
Right.
But you could see him just disappearing or being like a 1 or 2 episode type of guy.
Sure.
whereas everybody else seems like, well, I mean, Jerry and Donna, like you said, they're barely even there. Tom is obviously going to stick around, and Ron and Leslie. If Donna had not shown up in the second season, I wouldn't have been surprised after the first one. Same thing with Jerry, because they're very background characters.
Right.
But what's funny is Mark, who seems to be a central character in the first season, then disappears in season 3, I want to say.
Yeah, I think it's 3.
And then Donna and Jerry becomes his own recurring thing. And then Donna and Tom become probably 2 of the best characters in the whole show in terms of this show is really good at pairing people. Really good at setting up 2 people, and those 2 people, they get along with everybody else and they have their thing with everybody else, but those 2 people together are their own little group where you could watch a whole show about them.
Yep.
But yeah, so if you only ever watched the season and first season and gave up, it does get a lot better. It's a massively better show. So go back, and you do have to sit through the first season again, because I can understand how some people would not make it after the first season. It's dry. It's very dry, and it can be slow. But it is important. There's a lot of groundwork laid in it. I mean, I guess you could technically start in season 2 and you would know what was going on, but I think you lose some things. I would say it's not so unfunny that it's unwatchable by any stretch. So you could definitely, like I said, and I think it's only, it's not
6.
A full, I was going to say it's 8 or 6.
I think it's 6 episodes, so it's not long at all.
Right. It blows right by, because these are 22, 23-minute episodes, so you're not going to be sitting there for 4 hours or anything.
Right.
Or actually, you might be literally sitting there for, no, not even. It'd be 3 hours. So it's 3 hours. And then once you hit season 2, it immediately starts getting, it really is a much better show immediately. And then it just gets better and better and better from there. So every season just becomes better after that. So now, unlike Schitt's Creek, there's not really a pick a best, episode type of thing with Parks and Rec, because it definitely is a show that rewards you watching for a while, and these things kind of happen and go on, and you have several episodes tie back and into each other, and there's things that move back and forth. So it's not that you have to see every episode. It's not one of those type of shows. But I think it is one where if you watch it all the way through, there's things that are long-running gags and jokes and things that pop up, and it's definitely benefits from you being along the whole time. When you say that, it's not really a jump in and out type of thing. I mean, it is, but it's definitely better if you watch it straight through.
Right.
So let's do... Okay, who do we want to talk about first? Because there's a lot of good stuff. Which thing do we want to start with? Well, let's start with the central 2, which is Leslie and Ron. Because I think for me, my favorite aspect of this show, outside the fact that it's very funny, is their relationship is one of the best written ones, where you have 2 exceptionally different people who, for 95% of the show, there is no doubt about their loyalty to each other.
Right.
Which I think is... You don't see it very often, and you don't see it usually done this well, right? Would you agree that this type of thing is rare?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
they should be so opposite. I mean, they are so opposite, but like you said, they do it in a respectful way. And even if they get into fights and they yell at each other, like they kind of set where you think Ron's going to be an asshole, but he's not at all. And like, he can respect the fact that they differ on things, and at the end of the day, like, whatever happens, then their friendship is more important, even though he doesn't say they're friends. Work proximity associates or whatever he calls them, but it's their relationship is great.
Yeah, the fact that they are, because you said, well, they're very different. They are. These are fundamentally 2 people who you would never imagine would actually be able to. I mean, in real life, it's hard to imagine in the modern day 2 people like this working together and not wanting to kill each other.
Right.
Even though, as you watch it and see, and they definitely do have their disagreements. It's not as if they always agree on things. There are definitely kind of battles
Right.
where one person comes out, with what they want and the other person doesn't. But it's never
Yes.
vindictive. It's never mean. It's never, except again, late in the series, and it's over within 2 episodes. Yeah, 2 or 3, because it's like the first 2 or 3 episodes. That's all resolved.
Yeah. Right.
Outside of that, there's never a point where by the end of the episode they're not on the same page again.
Right.
So even if there's there's a thing where they're going back and forth over a publicly subsidized mini golf course, and basically Ron ends up temporarily anyway, from what we know, having the golf course shut down because he doesn't believe in public subsidies, because the character is portrayed as a hardcore libertarian who, and this was always one of the things that I don't know if it was we were just supposed to ignore it, or it's supposed to be its own joke, is why this person would stay in government for as long as he did. Because if you hate the government as much as he says he does, why would you stay in there as long as he did? It's one thing to say, because he always talks about how he wants to be in there and gut the
burn
belly
it from the inside. Yeah.
To kill the beast from the inside. But at a certain point, you have to realize you're not doing anything, and why would you stay? So I don't know if that's a gag or if it's just that they went, nobody will care, because honestly, it doesn't matter. But he is anti-government as much as anybody can be, and then Leslie is as pro-government as anybody could be. So they try to keep her somewhat politically neutral, but honestly, she would probably be what you would consider a very progressive liberal. I don't know how you can dance around that, because her love of the government could not possibly allow her to be anything else. How she thinks government is the solution to everything. And so her and Ron, in that way, are polar opposites, and yet it is the respect for each other's honesty, and that each of them knows the other person is being sincere. There aren't ulterior motives to what they're doing. There isn't a greed or a, something underneath. What they say is what they mean, and I think that's what makes them a really good pairing, is because each of them knows that the other one is not full of shit when they say, I believe this.
Right.
And then the other side of the Ron thing, and it's interesting that Ron is the one, because he's the most antisocial, or at least positioned that way, anti-friends, I don't want any human connection, whatever. And yet Ron has the most interesting kind of pairings, which is on the one side Leslie, and then with April, who is a I don't even know what you describe April as outside of a weirdo, but it does make sense the two of them would be friends, I guess, is the only way I could put it.
Just kind of, I mean, not reclusive, but kind of, and just like doesn't want any social connections other than, the people that she chooses. She just kind of keeps to herself, and she's kind of dark and hilarious, and her and Ron's relationship is great.
And she's also a character that it makes no sense that this person would take an internship at the Parks and Rec department. It makes no sense that this person would take an internship of this type. This is somebody who would take an internship. At one point they kind of play around with the idea that she might be go into like undertaking or
mortician.
Yeah, mortician.
Yeah, right, like a mortician.
Right,
yeah.
That's where this character would be, not in this place. So again, it's one of those things where you go, is it supposed to be a kind of gag or what? But it doesn't matter. It is just kind of funny, because the logic makes no sense if you actually step back and say, why would these two people be in government?
Yeah.
All the rest of them, it somewhat makes sense why they're there. I mean, Mark is a person who's disillusioned, but he seemed to at one point believe in government work. Don, I think, just wants to meet guys. That's what it seems like. It doesn't matter. And then Tom is obvious. He is the one who is the most kind of classic self-centered, greedy, trying to get ahead type of character, where they really play with Tom, as far as there are times where you really do hate that character, where he does things that are so selfish,
right,
that actually not physically hurt other people, but are hurtful to other people. And, I don't know how they got that character the way they did, because you never really hate him, but boy, you come up to it awfully close a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I don't know, again, how they manage that balance, because that is tough. Because Tom is probably the one who feels like he's out of The Office the most, the show The Office, in terms of his kind of self-involvement. And him and Donna being friends, kind of, I don't know how that really even, I mean, they just sort of, at one point, they're just people who understand each other. They don't really set it up all that much. It just happens.
Right.
But then once they're friends and once they kind of establish that the two of them are on the same wavelength, they're great.
They are so
They're just great.
They are. They are so fun together. They love the same things. Like, God, I wish you guys were Donna. Like, their relationship is so good.
I also like the fact that Donna she's very sex positive. She just picks guys and throws them away, but it's never presented like she's a slut or that there's anything wrong with it. It's always very just, that's Donna's thing.
Right.
Use that. What is it? Use them, abuse them, lose them.
Lose them.
Right.
That's
Stuff
what
like
Grammy Meagle said. She died under 2 20-year-olds or whatever she says. Like, that was Grammy Meagle's motto. Yeah, she's fucking great.
Which again, for a character in the first season who says, if not nothing, barely anything.
Yeah.
To then, and this is what I mean about there's such a drastic difference once the show really starts going. Once it gets going and it starts letting these characters have more of a, I guess, an individual spotlight or whatever, they get so good to the point where when you go back and rewatch it and watch the first season, it's sort of astonishing how much they're not there because they become so important later on. And then, of course, you get to the point where Mark is I always like that character. I think the actor is good.
Yeah, I do too.
But it is obvious that they did not know what to do with him at a certain point, that he didn't fit anymore.
Right.
And so he just kind of vanishes.
When Ben and Chris come in, it's like, oh, okay. I get it. But yeah, I liked him too.
Yeah, he was, and that, Mark is also an interesting character in that I think out of all of them, he changes the most in the shortest amount of time, because when he starts out, he's portrayed as a womanizer, and I don't know, there's something that changes about Mark where, like, when he's dating Ann, he seems like he's becoming a different person, and seems like, you know, and then of course that all blows up, which does, it's obvious that they didn't really know how to get rid of him, right? Because that seems to kind of come out of nowhere. Like, it goes from the two of them seem to be doing good to suddenly it's, oh, well, Anne's not happy with him anymore, you know, doesn't think it's right. And they blow that up and then he leaves. Although his exit is good.
Yes.
And then, like you said, once Ben and Chris show up, then the show becomes a whole different thing.
Right.
Better in every way. But again, because Chris and Ben are a great pairing, and then, of course, it becomes Chris and Ann, and then it's Ben and Leslie. So it really is just a show about pairings of people. And then there's Tom and Jean-Ralphio, which is a whole... It's such a weird thing that Tom is friends with Donna and Jean-Ralphio at the same time, because Donna hates Jean-Ralphio.
I hate that guy.
Yeah.
I'm out. I hate that guy.
Right.
And we've watched this show so many times. We quote this show so many times. So if I just say random shit, because I'm usually quoting this show because it's so good.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff in it that's quotable. There's man, and this show, because when we talked about Schitt's Creek again, we did kind of favorite episodes, because there are episodes that are just you can watch those episodes outside of the whole thing, and by themselves they're great.
Yeah. Parks
and Rec has some episodes like that, but it's more of series of episodes that you like. There's a lot of good 2-parters. There's a couple of good 3-parters. There's good just kind of storylines that resolve, but there's really a lot of kind of 2-episode things, like the Trial of Leslie Knope, which is a 2-parter. The thing where her and Ron are against each other and then make up, those 2 episodes, kind of where they set up how much they're angry at each other, and then their makeup episode, which is great. So in that way,
so great.
Yeah, that's a great set of episodes.
Yeah.
So in that way, it is. That's what I mean about this is a show where you do have to kind of watch the whole thing, and it just builds and gets better and better and better. And then they do the time jump at the end, which is interesting, because a lot of shows, that's kind of a common thing now, but I don't know that a lot of comedies did it. not like this one did, where the whole last season is 3 years in the future. I think.
Yeah.
Is it 3? Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't watch this when it was on, so I don't know, but I don't know when it was, but yeah, it was like 2017.
Right, but in terms of the show, they jumped forward 3 years from the last episode of season 6 to then the beginning of season 7. I think is supposed to be 3 years.
Okay, got it.
I'm pretty sure it's something like that.
Yeah,
it's not a
you're
huge
right,
amount of time.
because the kids were. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because the kids were like still little, so. Yeah, you're right. It's probably 3 years.
And then very similar to The Good Place, it has probably one of the best endings of any show. It's a really wonderful last episode. I actually think that's probably one of the better endings I've seen in a comedy or any show really, where they kind of resolve everything and show you a bit of the... So then in the end, you get this way jump into the future thing where you see where everybody ends up, and you get these wonderful little, funny bits there that lets you see, well, what are the possible... they don't present it as a possible future. It's supposed to be like, well, this is what happens.
Right.
But I guess now that we're 30 minutes in, I probably should have set up what the show is for everybody who's never watched it. So essentially what the show is it's supposed to be a documentary or mockumentary style, because they're talking to the camera. Unlike a lot of shows where, there are parts where they're talking directly into the camera. So it's supposed to be that some crew that we never meet. So this isn't like... say What We Do with the Shadows, where you actually see the documentary crew or who's filming it. You never actually see any of the people that are behind the camera, but it's clear that they're talking to a camera. So it's supposed to be this group of people who work in the Parks and Recreation Department of Pawnee, Indiana. And Leslie Knope is the deputy director. Ron Swanson is the director. And Ron basically is happy to do nothing and let Leslie do all the work. And Leslie is such a workaholic that she does the work of 18 people. And then everyone else on the show is either direct subordinates to her or people that work within the office. So there's Jerry is one of the people who works in the office, Donna. Tom jumps around in jobs and leaves and comes back at different points, but starts out as basically Leslie's assistant. April is the intern. Andy isn't even in the office in the first season. And then starting in the second season, second season is when he becomes the shoeshine guy.
Shoeshine, yeah.
Yeah. Anne is a woman in the town who's going out with Andy in season 1. He falls into a dugout pit that a condo construction guy was supposed to build, ran out of money, so there's this big empty pit. He falls into it, breaks his legs, and so Anne shows up in the first episode in a town meeting to say, hey, this pit, my boyfriend fell into it, you have to fill it, it's basically a public menace, whatever. And that meeting then leads her and Leslie to be best friends as the show goes on. And then Mark is the town city planner. And then Ben and Chris don't show up for quite a while. And then Donna is another, I guess, assistant in the office. They never give her a title, so I'm not really sure.
She's probably like the office manager, I think. I think that's what she's supposed to be.
Sure.
Because they nod at her like doing financial stuff. And I think she's probably supposed to be like the office manager.
Some kind of office coordinator of some kind.
Yeah.
Again, titles don't really, I don't think the titles are even important with those characters.
No.
It doesn't really matter. They're just working in the office.
Right.
And so basically that's the premise of the series, is how these people interact with each other. And then as time goes on, kind of, Leslie's attempts to get into the city council. So she's trying to move up the political ladder. And that's kind of, everybody else sort of orbits around Leslie. That's basically the show is. Everybody is kind of orbiting around her. And then later, people get their own things to do. At one point, Andy's becoming a children's entertainer. Tom is constantly trying to either run a scam or launch a business or somehow get himself out of government, but he's using the government for the connections. And then Ben and Chris show up as auditors when the city is in financial trouble. And they show up, and you think they're only going to be there for a couple episodes. And then Ben and Leslie very quickly, you can tell that they have something for each other. And Chris kind of seems to just like being wherever he is because he's portrayed as an uber positive, always uplifting type of character. Like everything's great with him, and he's a health nut, and he's just happy, and everybody he meets is the best person he's ever met in every town he's ever been in. Literally
the best.
Best whatever comes after that sentence type of thing.
Right.
And that's basically the arc of the show, and then, kind of what goes on. So like I said, there's not really best episodes to pick, but what are a couple of your favorite, I guess, storylines or things that happen? It could be one episode, it could be several, it really doesn't matter. We'll do it something like that. Like your favorite moments from the show. Forget episodes. Your favorite kind of things that go on in the show.
Well, Anne and Leslie's friendship always sticks out to me because they're different. Leslie's kind of, over the top, and she gets like crazy sometimes, and Anne seems to be more grounded, and but they are so down for each other and have each other's backs, and it's just such a beautiful friendship, and it's one of my favorite. I mean, I refer to my best friend, I call her the Ann Perkins to my Leslie Knope. Like, it's just, their friendship is just amazing to me, and that's one thing that sticks out to me. So there's an episode where they get into a fight because there's an opening for what is it, like the health
something, not inspector, something.
Like the board, not like a
health
public
director?
health,
might be health director,
something like that. So there's an opening that comes up. So Leslie wants Anne to do it because Anne's a nurse. So she's always kind of around, but she doesn't technically work there. So Leslie wants Anne to get this job. And so she comes and she wants her to read like 8 million books overnight and get really prepared on, because Leslie can just be crazy ass over the top at times, and everybody kind of knows how to rein her in as much as they can, but she does it in a way where you don't hate her for it. It's just how she is. And so Anne doesn't stay. She like goes out to a party because Tom is like part owner in a club, and he's like, he's debuting this the snake juice that he made, this liqueur that he made. And so Anne is there with a date. So Leslie and Anne get in this huge fight, and it is so funny just the way they yell at each other, and but it's just so funny because they're just like, it's like we're in high school. And then they have every other character is there, and that's where they stand in front of the camera, and I think they just, and this show, I know I'm going off a little off track, but I'll pick up on this. But they were basically, I think they just had the camera there and they could just basically do what they wanted. So they go through, and we laugh at this all the time, where April like dressed up and she had this little hat on. And so everybody is just completely drunk off their asses off of this stuff, except for Donna and Chris. Chris doesn't drink, and then Donna was on like a juice cleanse, but everybody else, so they're in front of this camera and they're either like talking, just whatever, or then Ron puts on April's hat and he's just dancing, and it is the funniest. We laugh so hard at this, and we send each other the gif of it all the time because it's just like, it makes me laugh. So it's like that's probably one of my, I wouldn't say favorite episodes, but it.
And the thing you have to understand, and this is what I mean about watching the show, watching one episode really just doesn't reward anything, because Ron is, the way the episode sets this up, because this is, Tom has, and I think, what is it? It's a Kahlua style drink. It's hugely filled with alcohol and sugar and all kinds of stuff. Donna refers to it as rat poison. And basically there's a part where Ron walks up and he only drinks certain things, and Tom's like, well, you have to talk this up for me. He's like, well, I don't endorse anything that I don't actually believe in. And so he says, just drink it. He's like, if you like it, then you have to talk it up. If you don't, then I'll shave John Ralphio's head, who's next to him. And the thing you would expect is that Ron would drink it and hate it because he's so buttoned up and straightforward and not a fun guy in any real kind of normal way. And so what the gag is that he drinks it and he loves it. And then he starts talking to everybody and telling them they have to drink it. And because it's so alcoholic. And this is kind of funny because later they make it like he can't get drunk. So there's later parts where he's talking about polishing off bottles of scotch and stuff like that. And he doesn't get drunk. But in this, he gets completely blitzed and he's bopping around with this stupid little hat on his head, which is so out of character for the person that we've seen throughout the show.
Right.
I mean, even the parts where he seems to be relaxing a little bit, like where he says, somebody want to watch me climb a tree? And they say yes. I mean, he basically just puts his hands together a little bit and shakes them, but he doesn't he's not a very performative person in terms of being happy. You don't see him laughing and like jumping up and down. So for him to be bopping around to a stupid, terrible club song with this ridiculous hat on his head it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about, if you only watch the one episode, you might not really get that necessarily, but to have seen this character who is generally, and then the next day when they all come back into the office, he's completely fine. Everybody else feels like they're dead.
Right.
So, again, he's a very kind of straightforward, not mean, but kind of gruff, I think is the best word for it. We're intimidating just because he doesn't give off any air that he wants anything to do with almost anybody. So for him to be bouncing around with this stupid hat bouncing on his head as he does, I mean, you can look it up and you'll find the video in 2 seconds.
Yes.
So that is definitely, that we always laugh at that one. I think honestly, one of the ones that I, and this is weird because I talked about how for the first season it isn't necessarily great, but the one where April drinks the liquor. And so, and Leslie had brought this package in and she really wanted to be accepted by some of the guys that worked there. So she brought the liquor. She opened this package, even though she had made this big speech about not accepting gifts as government employees, but she opens it up and she takes it out there. And then at one point, April, who was underage at that point, drinks some of the wine, takes a video of herself and posts it on the government website. And so Leslie starts posting all these apologies and emailing everybody, and then is brought in front of a review board. And Ron has to go as he's her direct supervisor. And Leslie is essentially breaking down and saying, I did this, and, she's worried she's going to be fired. And then Ron at one point just finally says, nope, that's it. We're leaving. Because he's like, this is ridiculous. We don't live in communist China. He's saying all this stuff about this is America. And basically that's one of the first episodes where you realize that he's going to defend her no matter what, because he knows that she is a good person. And everything else is basically bullshit to him. So as long as there's a good person, then he doesn't care. And again, that immediately kind of tells you, even in the first episode, that was locked in right from the beginning. And that stays consistent all the way through, which does then later make the, 7th season? Yeah, 7th season, where the two of them are basically hate each other. That makes that all the better or all the worse, I guess, because these two characters have been through a lot already and have never turned on each other. So for it to get to this point, you're like, what happened? And then that's what gets laid out in the first couple episodes, because they just start out that way. You don't get any backstory on it. You have no idea what's going on until they see each other, and he's left the Parks Department, and they're against each other. And then they kind of get into what went on with that, which I won't do the entire synopsis of it, but all the episodes before make that a better kind of couple of episodes because they never turned on each other before. What could have happened? And it makes sense. And of course they make up, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I know you really love the one where they make up too. So those couple of episodes I think are really good because they pay off for all the stuff that came before, all the stuff that leads up to it. Right. So I would say that's one of my favorite little bits from it.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on the fact, I wanted to talk about Mike Schur, and I know he's not the only creator, but he is everything we've watched of his, because he did The Good Place as well, and I've listened to a lot of stuff about him. I've listened to he's been on different podcasts that I've listened to, and the way that he does a show is like, you can tell with the shows that he does that they are having, it feels so much more than just like people, these actors getting paid to just like go to work and read lines and that's that. Like, they feel like a family, and they feel like these characters are real and they get along. And I think that has a lot to do with the environment that he creates. Like, he has like a no asshole, no ego policy. And a lot of the actors that have been on his shows will tell you that. Like, you are not allowed to, you know, pull power trips, be an asshole. Like, he doesn't tolerate any of that shit. And he also, going with the no ego thing, best idea wins. It doesn't matter if they're brainstorming ideas or whatever. Somebody who isn't technically a writer, great example. There's an episode where everybody has the flu. And so they're talking to her, and she has this big, they're getting the Harvest Festival ready, so she can't be sick. And she's walking out of her office because they're like, oh, you need to go to the hospital. You need to get medicine because you're very sick. And so Andy, who is played by Chris Pratt, he's sitting at the computer and he goes, as she's walking by, he goes, hey, Leslie, I typed your symptoms into the computer and it says you may have network connectivity problems. And I mean, great line. That was Chris Pratt just improvising. And Mike Schur will say that's one of the best lines of the show. And it infuriates him because it's like, he's a writer. This is his job. But it's like, best line wins. It doesn't matter who says it. It doesn't matter. And they have these cameras set up to where they can kind of go off. You know, it's not an improv show. They have a script. They have a story they want to tell. But if there's something that they say that they think is funnier than what they wrote, they'll put it in. And I absolutely love that the egos aren't there. And it's just, they're just trying to make this inclusive, funny, positive show. And I really I am such a fan of his. And because everything I've heard of how he runs a show and the environment that he creates is very positive. And when we talk about The Good Place, we'll talk way more about that. But it's just, I really like that about that show, about how he works and what he creates.
I would be curious. I mean, I don't know that there's, I haven't seen any really behind the scenes stuff where they talk about the making of the show, but it's always interesting when people who are from improv, which, what is Leslie Knope's real name? Amy Poehler is an improv comedian.
Right.
And then 30 Rock also, Tina Fey, also improv. And
yes.
Then we're currently watching the HBO series Silicon Valley, which is filled with improv comedians. And I know a lot of Silicon Valley is made up. They made it up in the episode. Like the Jared character, who is hysterical, he says at times these really horrific backstory things about his childhood or whatever. And what I read is he made most of that up in the episode. They did not write that.
Really?
He just came up with it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well,
wow.
because, let's see, Richard Hendrick, I don't know, something Middleditch, TJ Miller, who's
Tom.
Ehrlich.
Yeah.
The actor who plays Dinesh and Jared, they're all improv comedians.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Whereas in Good Place, I think I know Aziz Ansari is a stand-up comedian. I don't know if he's improv, though, because that's a different type of thing. That's where you're making, for those who don't know, I mean, I assume everybody probably already knows what improv comedy is, but for those who don't, that's where you just go up and you have to just make it up as you go along. There is not a skit. There aren't pre-written jokes. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll say to the audience, okay, shout a scenario at us, like, you're both grade school teachers fighting over a ham sandwich. Okay. And then they run with something like that. So I think Amy Poehler is the only person, I could be wrong about that, but I wonder if that was some of what Michael Schur wanted, where they could come up with this stuff, because people like that, unlike a lot, there are comedians, actors, where they will not go off the script. Kevin Smith famously does not want any deviation from any of his stuff when he was making his movies. I don't know if that's still the case, but in his early career, a lot of the people who worked with him said, yeah, he won't let you say anything that's not on the page.
Oh,
with
wow.
the exception of like Ben Affleck and because he knew him. So he would let him do
Sure.
like one line once, maybe. Everybody else, he's like, stick to what's on the page. I don't want anything else. This is how I hear it in my head. This is how I want it. Whereas Michael Schur seems like he's much more open to that with somebody like Amy Poehler, who can probably recognize or encourage that type of thing. That makes a lot more sense. And it really does the whole way through. And I've said this about when I've done movie reviews for some movies or different things. I've said one of the things I like best is when it feels like everybody's having fun. Even if it's not necessarily, in terms of the movies I review, a good movie. If everybody's having a good time, I don't care as much if it doesn't really work. And this show really feels like everybody's having a great, and it the stuff we've seen with behind the scenes and the outtakes and everything makes it seem that way as well.
Yeah.
And with somebody like Michael Schur, who, if that's his kind of way of working, it feels like it would be a more pleasant environment to work in. Because I've never heard anybody say anything bad about working with him either. So that does seem to be the case. That makes the show better because nobody wants to work in misery.
Right.
Right.
So they're going to give you a better performance if they're happy and they're, for sure.
It's particularly in comedy. Now there is this idea that, if you're talking about a dramatic show or you want to be able to tap into darker feelings and all the rest of it. So maybe that's a different thing. But in comedy, nobody wants to work who's miserable in comedy. It's hard to be funny when you feel like you want to kill everybody around you, I would think. Right. I'm not a comedian, but that's my guess. Sure. So, I think that's probably a big part of it. But also there is this thing I've noticed about a lot of shows that we like where a lot of the people in them have at least one improv person where they're kind of, and I think that kind of helps if you're willing to be experimental with the comedy and everything else. I mean, yes, there are great comedy writers and you write the bits and you recite the lines. That works too. But it's kind of like What We Do in the Shadows. That feels like everybody in that show is having fun too.
Yes.
It seems like, it's like, how could you be around Matt Berry and not be having a good time because he's fucking hysterical. So, I mean, everybody is, but that's, again, the shows that we like seem to be the ones that, because I think some of What We Do in the Shadows is at least partially kind of made up too. So yeah, I think that's very clear in this show. The Good Place feels like that too, where everybody likes each other and is having a good time. And even if it doesn't necessarily result in a joke like Andy's joke or Chris Pratt's joke, you still kind of get it in the way the characters relate to one another.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. It's great.
I don't know. Is there anything I'm trying to go through? Oh, the Donna and Tom treat yourself stuff is great.
Yes. This show totally, this show created, so Donna and Tom go on, you could talk about the treat yourself thing, but with that, and then Galentine's Day, this show actually created things that are almost commercial now. Galentine's Day is a thing. Treat yourself. You see treat yourself everywhere. And it's it originated with this show. It's so funny.
Yeah, so what Treat Yourself is for people who've never seen the show is it's essentially a day that Donna and Tom decide to, at least at first, they just go to the mall. They pick out things that are ridiculously unnecessary, spend a bunch of big money on it, and it's basically a complete selfish day. I don't know how else you would really describe it. It's a day where you just go out, and if you see a scarf that is 4 times as much as it should cost and doesn't really go with anything, but you just happen to like it, you're going to buy it, you're going to put it on, you're going to wear it out of the store. And so that becomes a thing where they do it 3 times, because there's the one with Ben. Yeah. There's the one where they go to Beverly Hills, which is a great one. Is there one other one, or is that all I'm thinking? There's only 2.
There might only be 2.
Maybe there's only 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's presented as something they do all the time. So they do it every year, it seems like.
Once a year, yeah.
Right.
It's
they
the
do
best
it every
day
year.
Of the year.
Right, exactly. And so there again, that's one of these things where You don't see it the first time they do it, but it's just established as they've been doing that, and that's something that they both just, it, again, connects them as people. They're both, what do they say? It's all about things. We like things.
Mimosa,
that type of thing.
fine leather goods. Treat yourself. Yeah.
Right. But yes, there's multiple things like that that are now recurring things. I mean, Ron Swanson as a character was everywhere. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that character's face before I knew anything about the show.
Right.
Or hearing about the mustache. That was the big thing, was I would hear references to Ron Swanson's mustache.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what the hell anybody was talking about at that point when it was still on. But you couldn't, for a couple of years, you just couldn't get away from it. Which is fine. I mean, I understand now what it was all about, because that's one of the big things with the show, is just kind of Ron's general macho manliness without being an overpowering douchebag about it. He is just presented as kind of the classic, everybody wants to be around him because he's Ron Swanson. And there really is no more explanation necessary type of thing. Kind of like when he's wearing the raccoon skin.
The raccoon hat.
Yeah, the raccoon hat, and Tom takes it around, and nobody's interested, and then Ron puts it on for 2 seconds, and a woman leans in and goes, "Hey, nice hat." And he's like, "Thank you, ma'am." And then the other thing would be the relationship between Ben and Leslie. I think that's that from beginning to end is really, really good. The thing where they're in the UN, the mock UN, is fantastic. That has one of the best lines in the entire series. Where whatever, I'm going to spoil it. Sorry, but so essentially, there's Ben and Leslie. When Ben and Chris show up, they're the state auditors. They come in and they're slashing, and Leslie hates Ben right away, because the way it's presented is Ben is the serious guy who's going to tell you that they're going to have to cut jobs, cut costs, cut back. And Chris comes in and makes everybody feel good. And then Ben brings down the hammer on them and tells them, here's the reality of what we're going to be doing to your town. And so Chris gets to say, yay, everybody, you're doing a great job, and leave. And then Ben's like, okay, who are we firing? And so Leslie hates him. And then after a while, he's talking to her about the fact that he was a mayor and kind of blew all of his town's money on something ridiculous because he was too young to be mayor. And he's saying, if you want to be a politician, you're going to have to start making hard decisions. You're not always going to get everything you want. And so there comes a point where they're just kind of on even footing for a while, and then it becomes clear that the two of them like each other. But Chris has a rule that nobody who works in the same department or is a subordinate to somebody else, there can be no relationships because it can lead to abuse of power. So technically, Ben and Chris are superiors to Leslie, or at least, they're overseeing their department, however you want to put it. I don't know what the exact, job things would be. So they cannot have a relationship. Then they start secretly fooling around. And then there's a point where Ben's like, we can't keep doing this because we're never going to be able to go public. We can't sneak around. This is not a relationship. We cannot do this. And so Leslie's like, okay, but really doesn't. Leslie wants to keep having a lot of contact with Ben, even though they can't be together. And Ben can't do it because he just finds it too tough to be around her, because it makes it worse that he can't be with her.
And she decides to run for city council. Yes. And so that's like a total scandal. So they decide they have to break up because of that. Because
if it comes out, that's it, which does eventually happen. But so there's a point where they're working together, but he's, there's a tension because he's, he keeps saying, we can't, this isn't really working. And they're at this mock UN thing, which they're both excited about because they're both nerds about government. And so there's a point where they're different countries, and then they're doing a photo shoot for Leslie, and she's like, well, I just need you to tread water while I do this. And he's like, what? And then that's kind of the breaking point for him as far as trying to make this work the way it's been going. And so she's doing her photo shoot. She comes back and finds out that he's done a bunch of stuff without her. And she gets very upset and then at one point just declares war in the UN, says, I'll declare war on your country. And then it's just, they turn the whole thing into just essentially a giant war game because they're pissed at each other, really, because Leslie's pissed at Ben. And there's a point where he has an alliance, and he takes out a white piece of cloth and he throws it and he says, here, you're going to need this to wave this as a sign of surrender. And she says, the only thing I'm going to be waving is your decapitated head in front of your weeping mother. And everybody stops dead. And Ben goes,
Lord.
"Oh my Lord." Yeah. And then after that, there's a point where Ben's like, "Okay, that's it. I have to get transferred. I can't work anywhere near you anymore. It just can't be done." And so, Leslie's trying to fight it. And then there's a point where she's like, "Okay, here's what it is. I want to be with you, but I know you don't want to, so I'm fine. I'll respect that finally because I've just been ignoring it pretty much. But the other thing is we can go public and we can just say what happened and take the consequences." And so then there's a set of episodes, I think one episode is the trial of Leslie Knope, but there's all these things that lead up to it. And then Ben essentially just resigns and says, "Blame me. Don't fire Leslie," because she thinks she's going to get fired because technically they bribed somebody, which is in the scope of the show is such a minor thing, but it is in fact a fireable offense. They bribed a city employee to keep their relationship quiet. And so once she realizes, because they kind of didn't even think about it, it was such a minor thing, that once it happens, she says to Ron, she's like, "I think I'm about to get fired." And Ron's basically like, "Yeah, I think you are too." He basically doesn't say, "No, you're not." He's kind of nods at her and says, "Yeah, I think you are."
Right. Yeah.
And then they just say, "Okay, you're going to be suspended for 2 weeks," and she can't figure out why. And then Chris tells her that Ben had resigned and taken the blame. And so that's basically the point where now they're together, and though that the whole thing with the two of them is fantastic. I think that's probably one of, if not my favorite part of the show outside of the relationships. It's their whole arc together because it's just really wonderfully done. And they do make sense to be together and they get to be together. And yeah, there's some bumps and all the stuff that happens, but ultimately the two of them do get together and then they're together for the rest of the show. And, it ends with them together. So.
Yeah, it's great. Their relationship is great.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're both just giant nerds.
Yeah. And then Andy and April, too. Their relationship is just great. Like, they did a really good job on this show. Because you wouldn't think that Andy and April they just seem so not a good couple, but they work and they're so cute and they just love each other and the show did a really good job with the friendships and relationships. Yeah,
that's what I mean about my easiest summary of what makes the show good is the way that it handles pairings of characters, like you said, friends or romantically. Its real strength is the way that two people end up relating to one each other, because most things break down into two people. Even if it starts with everybody involved, at some point the episode you're going to end up with two people. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole episode about Donna and April when basically April's running the animal control department or whatever they call it. I think it just gets absorbed, but
the animal
and Donna's
control.
slacking off. And so April's anonymously posting things about her, and there's a whole funny thing where Ron finds out what reviews are, and he's just writing reviews with his name on it, and like telling Canada to go screw itself. And April's like, "Who are you telling in Canada to go screw itself?" And he says, "No, I'm telling Canada to go screw itself." And then it becomes a whole thing about Donna and April and the fact that they have to be straight with one another, and then the other one where they're picking animals. And April picks
spirit dogs.
The spirit dogs, and April picks a dog about Donna that's based on a very superficial version of her.
Poodle, because it's pretty and it likes makeup, and she's like, "That's all you know about me," and gets a little offended.
Right. But that's what I mean. Is a lot of things end up back at two people in one way or another. So.
Right.
And now we've talked for an hour about Parks and Rec.
Nice.
Was there anything is there anything else you wanted to say about the show? Is there anything else in particular you wanted to spotlight?
No, I mean we didn't really go didn't do a deep dive, but just it if you haven't seen it, you should give it a try, and I mean we were, like Joe said, we didn't watch it right away, but we were pretty late to this show, and we rewatch it. It's one of on our rotation. We watch it all the time. It's so good, and I quote it all the time. They did a really good job with it.
Like I said, I really, when it was on, had zero interest in it. I didn't
even know about it. I live in my own little sheltered bubble where I don't really know much of goes on. Same with 30 Rock. We were really late to 30 Rock too. We didn't watch it until way after it was over. And then we tried it and we love it, and that's on our rotation too. But like, because I don't watch, I don't know who any of these people are because I don't watch Saturday Night Live. I kind of live in my own little weird cave. But yeah, I'm glad we tried it because it's great.
Yeah, 30 Rock, I think I had seen it compared to Parks and Rec. I'm pretty sure that's why I was like, okay, we liked Parks, because we watched 30 Rock after Parks and Rec, right?
Yes.
We did.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
And I think that's the reason, as I had seen a lot of people that there were lists of shows that, because Parks and Rec, when it was on, never got good ratings. 30 Rock never got good ratings. They were always on the risk of being canceled. For whatever reason, they never did well. That's, I think, why the last season is actually half the episode count. I think it's only 12 episodes as opposed to the normal 20 or so, whatever a normal season is. For both Parks and Rec and 30 Rock's last season, I think, is also short.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 Rock's a little bit more obvious about it because there's a part where literally, not to jump to 30 Rock because we could do a whole thing on that too. There's the thing where Weird Al shows up and he's like, hey, watch our show, help. He's basically like, our ratings suck, watch us. Does a whole bit at the end.
Yeah.
But Parks and Rec also was, at several points they were talking about canceling it. It never, I don't think it ever really did all that well. Not in terms of other mega hits like The Office was a giant thing. Friends was a giant, because that was on NBC, and NBC had a string of huge shows for a certain amount of time. Frasier, Friends, Seinfeld, The Office. Like, there's a number of shows that are classics that all were NBC. And in comparison to those, because I think this was on either right after The Office ended or while The Office was still on. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it was in close proximity to it. And so when you're up against something that's a juggernaut like that, if you're not at the same level, you're going to be seen differently, even though I'd say this show is light years better than anything The Office ever did. But that's just my opinion. I don't want to have people coming after me with pitchforks. Fine. The Office is better. Great. You're right. I'm wrong.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely it bops around on different services. That's the only thing that's annoying about it. It's jumped from Netflix to not being on. I don't know. It's been on different things at different times. 30 Rock does that too. It seems like that's just everything now, which sucks. There's no reliable place. I think Peacock does have it. So that I can't. I think you can get you still can get Peacock free with ads. And the fact that Peacock exists when that was a joke on 30 Rock, but that's a whole 30 Rock thing, so we'll save that. But the fact that is now an actual streaming service when that was basically almost a gag on 30 Rock and MILF Island basically exists. So Jesus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but like I said, we'll save that for the 30 Rock episode.
Yeah.
But I do think it's on Peacock. It is worth watching. Like I said, I would understand that people would watch the first season and maybe give up on it. Stick with it or just jump to season 2. Because honestly, all you really need to know is that there was a pit, that Andy fell in it, and that Ann and Leslie became friends because of the pit. That's it. That's all you really need to jump into season 2. And then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you were put off by season 1, I get it.
It's not unwatchable, but it does feel so much different. But it's not.
No,
it's terrible,
I agree. It's not terrible, but I could see some people going, I don't know what's so special about this, and giving up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, stick with it because it is. Yeah. It gets a lot better for sure.
Yes. Or like I said, you can start with season 2 because honestly, all you really need to know is the thing about the pit. As long as you know that, you really don't need anything else. Right. The pit. So, yeah, that's it. That's another good show. Kind of like Schitt's Creek. That's one of the ones that we watch all the time. I think it's a very almost uniformly positive show in terms of, it's very rarely mean in the way that a lot of shows are. Outside of how they treat Jerry, which is...
I was just going to say, except for Jerry.
Yeah, although I do like the fact that eventually what they ended up showing you was that Jerry may be the buffoon in the office, but outside the office, he pretty much the whole show has the best life of anybody for a while.
Right.
Where he has a wonderful wife and daughters. He's very happy with his family. He goes home and he just loves being with them. So whereas most of the people on the show, for the majority of the show are either single or can't, be with the person that they want to be with for a while, or have horrible ex-wives like Ron does, which we didn't even get into.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Tammy too, which is his real life wife.
Real life.
Is
Megan Mullally.
Their episodes together are almost worth watching the whole show for, because they're just
Oh, they're so good.
She's great.
She's so good.
Yeah, it's and that's something where you just have to imagine on the show the two of them had to be just having a blast with the shit they were saying to each other. Had to be just great. And probably everybody else too, because
yeah.
But it really is.
You definitely feel that they are just having a
Oh
blast.
yeah, that's what I mean. There are shows where you can really, and movies where you can tell that. And again, a lot of movies I've reviewed, even if they're not great movies, if I feel like everybody's having a good time, I really don't care. And a show like this, where I think it is actually a genuinely funny and very well made show, that just makes it all better. Right. And knowing the thing about Michael Schur and the environment is also great, because you just know that there were, that's the only bad thing, is there were probably really we've seen outtakes of stuff they could not possibly put on television.
Oh, yeah.
Go find some of the bloopers or cut stuff from Parks and Rec and look for the comeback kid jokes and what went on with those, where they have the dog saying, "Go fuck yourself, Ann," or whatever it is.
Yes.
And because they couldn't air that on television, obviously. They did bleep things, but stuff like that, you could not bleep it properly and still have it be funny.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot about it that's great. But even the show, even without the cut stuff, it's again it ends very positively. Everybody seems to have a good outcome, which I know some people have said, it's kind of a sappy ending, and it's like, yeah, it is, but I don't really care. Not every ending has to be horrible and depressing. You can have a happy ending too.
Yeah. I really like how they ended it. I agree that it's a really good ending. They did a great job.
Yeah. Everybody ends up in a place where they seem like they're happy.
Yep.
And that's, whether that's realistic or not is a separate thing, but I really don't need it to be realistic. Yeah.
Have fun with it.
This is not a show where I'm looking for gritty realism. I'll watch Homicide: Life on the Street if I want that. So
there you go.
This is not that. So basically, yes, my final summary for Parks and Rec is it's not Homicide: Life on the Street. There. That's an easy way of putting it. It's a lot more lighthearted than that and fun. So, yeah, that's it. That's our Parks and Rec show. And, yeah, we'll probably do one on The Good Place. I could see us doing one on 30 Rock. We'll probably end up doing one. What We Do in the Shadows will end at some point.
Oh, my
sadly.
gosh.
I know. But that will be a whole thing.
That show is so... If you haven't seen that show...
Yeah, I don't shut up about that show either. That's another one.
So good.
But Parks and Rec is an easy recommendation. It's one of those shows that I think most people will find something to like about. And it really makes, if you want to kind of, just even though we haven't done the episode yet, if you want to pair this with The Good Place, two great shows that you could watch back to back because they feel like they are related, even though there's nothing really indicating they are. They feel like shows that exist in the same place.
Yeah.
And that's because it's the same kind of general creative energy behind the scenes. So, but yeah, Parks and Rec, really good. We could review every episode, and I don't think there's any. Are there any episodes? No, I don't think there's any episodes of this show that I would skip.
No.
Even Schitt's Creek, the one with where they kill the
of...
cat, I would skip that one. But I don't think there's anything in this one I would skip.
I can't think of one either.
No. So, like I said, we could literally do a thing, but there's plenty of videos on the internet for that. If you want somebody who's doing every single episode, you'll find it somewhere else. I'm sure somebody's done it on YouTube. They've done everything else. Can't imagine they haven't done this. But if you don't feel like spending 72 hours watching people react to every single episode, we did it in a little over an hour. And the end result is it's a very fun, positive show that leaves you with a good feeling when you hit the end of it. And honestly, I like that now. I've had enough of misery. That's the world.
You're getting soft on me.
No, I am. I used to like all the misery shit when I was younger.
No happy ending, everything death and destruction.
Yep. And now I can still bear with that stuff, but I tend to watch less of it, at least intentionally. So I'd like everybody to be alive at the end of things. That's why I don't like Rogue One. Sorry, people who like Rogue One. Everybody's dead. Anyway, I'm not going to rant about that again. Or fucking Man of Steel, that piece of shit. Anyhow, let's end this one in a positive, uplifting way. Sam, thank you for doing this again.
You're welcome. Thank
Everybody
you.
else, watch Parks and Rec. It will make you feel good. It'll have you quoting the characters. It'll annoy people when you do and they don't know what you're talking about, but you know what? Who cares?
Treat yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Treat yourself to Parks and Rec because it's a fun show. And that's it. We'll be back again next week, and I assume Lando will be back unless he decides to jet off to someplace else, in which case we'll find another show to talk about. But that's it, everybody. Have a good weekend. Go watch Parks and Rec, and treat yourself.
Bye.
Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.